This is the forgotten aspect of plyometric training that can unlock more speed and power. Yes, when we use plyometrics in particular, we're looking to improve qualities of speed and power through changes, for example, in neural adaptation, so being able to fire more impulses to the muscle. We're looking at architectural changes such as increased muscle fascicle length, changes in pronation angle to improve contractile speed of the muscle. And we're looking at morphological changes such as retaining or improving type 2 muscle fibers. And then we have the changes at the tendon to potentially increase our ability to use elastic energy. If you're not familiar what a plyometric is, it's essentially a rapid eccentric to concentric muscle action. So think about when you're hitting the floor, whether you're jumping or running and you bounce off that floor, that will be a plyometric action. But there's one thing we forget about plyometrics that can change the way you use them in your training and can potentially help you further improve speed, power, and coordination that can transfer to your combat sport. And that is rhythm and timing. Now, rhythm and timing is more of a, I guess you could say, a woo-woo talking point within the strength and conditioning because it doesn't fall under physiology or mechanical outputs. It's more of a, you see it and you know it when you see it. And it becomes more of an observation from coaches as they've spent time in the field. And it's not something that can be measured, which can make this relatively speculative, but I want to go into it because I think it is very important to understand this idea of rhythm and timing, not just within the sport, which is very important, but within your training itself and how it can potentially translate into the sport. Now, as always, there'll be links down in the description. You get the free MMA, Jiu-Jitsu, and boxing strength conditioning blueprints. You have the training app, you get a 7-day free trial. If you want to work with me one-on-one, there's a link down there too. But let's go into this idea of rhythm and timing within plyometrics. Plyometrics themselves have a rhythm. And there's this idea of pretension. And pretension is essentially the muscle's ability to activate before you hit the ground. And it's what creates the stiffness when you hit the ground so you can bounce. Think about if you drop a pillow onto the floor or if you drop something like a basketball or a bouncy ball, the pillow hits the ground, it deforms and it just hits the floor, whereas the bouncy ball or the basketball hits the ground and bounces back up. What you're trying to achieve with the plyometric action is that stiffness or having less deformation as you hit the ground, which comes from this pretension of the muscles when you hit the ground. But then it has to be able to bounce and propel yourself in the air and relax again. So it becomes an activation, relaxation rhythm as you go through your plyometrics. So if you're doing something like jumping rope or something that is very rhythmic and cyclical, even pogos, it becomes relatively easy to coordinate this pretension because it is a set rhythm. You're just kind of bouncing up and down at the same pace. Now we can challenge that rhythm within plyometrics by changing things within the plyometrics themselves, whether that's the actual task or whether that's the environment, in order to facilitate or at least challenge this rhythm and pretension. And in doing so, it could potentially have knock-on effects to help improve performance and potentially reduce your risk of injury because it gives you a little more variability within your training. So here's a couple of examples how you could use it within your training. So if you think about your typical pogos or ankle pops, like your jumping rope, the furthest example I'll take from what I really want to give you is maybe doing jumping rope or something to the rhythm of a song. Different tempos, maybe different tempos within the song, and that way you're having to coordinate your rhythm of what you're doing into what you're doing with an external cue. That is one example of changing or at least providing some kind of change within the task. But where I think it's best used is changing the environment. Now, often you're typically not gonna fight on maybe rings or octagons or mats that are maybe different surfaces or different feelings. They're typically gonna be pretty uniform wherever you go. But you might find some that are less stiff, more bouncy, etc., and they might be slightly different. And maybe if you're fighting in rural area somewhere, maybe that boxing ring is a little bumpy. And you want to be able to negotiate or at least navigate these changes in the ground effectively. So this is where something like a pogo could be done over different surfaces. So instead of doing just pogos on the spot, you might do pogos going forward like an ankle pop, and you might have different height plates. You might have different surfaces like foam mats, different heights of surfaces. And this way you're having to change the rhythm of the pogos as you go through this, easy to say, an obstacle course. You're gonna have to land at different heights, which means you have to have that pretension turn on earlier. You might have to land on a softer surface, which means you have to negotiate with that surface and then back onto hard ground. And this way you're able to change and challenge some of that rhythm to be able to go through and provide that variability. So you're able to effectively negotiate with the ground regardless of the surface height or the surface type. That would be a very easy way to level up some of your lower level plyometrics. As you get into your more intense plyometrics, think of your hurdle hops. That's already a rhythm bouncing over the same height hurdles all the way through. but you can change the rhythm by changing hurdle heights throughout the entire motion. So instead of it being all the same height, you might have ascending heights. You might have a high one, a low one, a medium one, and just change it randomly. So you're having to effectively change the rhythm as you're jumping through the hurdles. Another way could be adding different contacts in between the hurdles. So you might jump and then double contact onto the ground, then have to jump again. These are all different ways you can change the rhythm and the timing of these plyometrics to challenge some of this pretension and challenge some of the rhythm of being able to use elastic energy well. Now, am I saying that doing this, you're suddenly going to be the most powerful and fast fighter in your gym and you're just gonna start knocking everyone out? No. This is just a very small piece of the puzzle, but it's one of those pieces that you can play with and it will give you a little more variation in your training, a little more excitement, and a little more challenge than just maybe your more traditional jump and plyometric training. And you can literally implement it today. It doesn't take much to do except put some plates and other mats on the ground to be able to do it. But if you're further interested in plyometrics, I actually detailed an entire plyometric progression from beginner all the way to advanced, so you can run through and do your own program with it, and you can watch that right here.